So I am going to start with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the lands on which Memorial University's campuses are situated are in the traditional territories of the diverse Indigenous groups we acknowledge with respect the histories and cultures of the Beothuk, Mi'kmaq, Innu, and Inuit of this province. We encourage everyone to reflect on these lands from where you are located and the Indigenous peoples for whom these lands are traditional territory. My name is Lisa Goulet. I am the Membership Engagement Coordinator for UArctic. I've been working with Memorial University since 2022, but in this position since 2023. A little bit about UArctic to start. UArctic is a network of universities, colleges, research institutes, and other organizations concerned with education and research in and about the North. So they work through cooperation with education, research, and outreach to help enhance human capacity in the North and promote viable communities and sustainable economies. Memorial has been an active member of UArctic since 2004, so we have been engaged for quite a while. We are engaged within the UArctic's board of directors. We have 3 chairs and 1 fellow. We are engaged with thematic networks, several of which, including the Northern and Arctic Island Studies, Teacher Education for Social Justice and Diversity in Education, Arctic Safety and Security, Circumpolar Archives, Folklore, and Ethnography, and just to name a few. We have student ambassadors and a current memorandum of understanding for the Arctic senior leadership position, of Vice President, Northern Community Engagement. And then there is also my position, which is funded through Global Affairs Canada and based here at Memorial University. So that's a little bit of history about what UArctic is as an organization and a little bit about the ways that Memorial engages. But I'm going to get into a little bit more detail about the benefits and a little bit more detail about those ways that Memorial is engaged with UArctic. So what are some of the benefits? So some of the benefits we have are support letters. Support letters are endorsements of academic activities. They are an additional sign and proof of adherence to the UArctic missions and values. So UArctic has 6 different values that are used to help grow human capacity in the North through education, research, and outreach, as mentioned before. So those 6 values are the promotion of Northern voices and circumpolar worldview, inclusivity and openness, respect and trust in collaboration and partnerships, embracing Indigenous perspectives and knowledge, and the sharing of knowledge, and finally providing decision makers with knowledge-based advice that supports sustainable development in the Arctic. And so with these 6 values in mind, any of your projects that lean on these values, you can ask for an endorsement letter, or it can be UArctic endorsed with a logo or a support letter. And the support letter is just to help you document proposed activity or initiative that's rooted in the networking cooperation. And it can also strengthen arguments for wider use of project investment for the funder. So that's the support letters in a nutshell. The chairs and fellows are positions that are held. As mentioned, we have 3 UArctic chairs. 1 was just appointed this year. They're highly qualified academics who will serve as academic drivers in the broad problem area of relevance in the Arctic. They implement and drive collaborative actions among UArctic members and thematic networks. And along with chairs and fellows, we also have the assembly reps. Assembly reps are representatives that are allotted the position to vote in Congress and in the Assembly during Congress, or in the Assembly during the UArctic Assembly. So in the UArctic Assembly, that's where all governance takes place, and where we decide new thematic networks, new members, where we decide certain government or certain, not government, but certain governance and policies for the organization. And members are asked to come and vote on those. Media channels, we have several. We have, the social media channels. We have our bulletin, we have our newsletter. There are several different ways that you can share news and different activities and project activities that you are doing. And we promote that on the UArctic website, as well as in the bulletin that goes out internationally to all our members. So those are broadly some of like the general benefits that are used, but the benefits that are used most likely, and the ones that I'm going to spend more time on because I think they're more relevant to the audience, is the thematic networks, the funding, and the north-to-north exchanges and mobility, which Nicole, who's another panelist on this webinar, will go into after I'm done explaining the thematic networks and the funding. So thematic networks are a little bit confusing. Thematic networks are self-governing units. They are devoted to research, monitoring, and education through and like different themes throughout the Arctic. They're empowered by local knowledge and international level academic experience, and they facilitate development of multidisciplinary solutions for challenges. So that's just a hard way of saying there are networks of researchers who come across from all across the globe that work together for common goals and themes. So MUN is engaged in 9 different thematic networks with 17 different researchers connected to them. If you have if you have work that matches already existing thematic networks, some of which I already mentioned, but at the beginning when I was explaining what UArctic is, but for, it was the folklore, ethnography, Arctic sustainable resources, Arctic safety and security, teacher education for social justice and diversity in education. It's different themes like that. So you take the theme and you have, people from Norway and Finland and Greenland and Canada all working together towards a common project. What can be difficult is because they are a self-governing unit, they don't have to answer to UArctic necessarily. So as a Canadian engagement coordinator, it is partially my job to help put you in contact with some of the thematic network leads if you're having a problem with that. So I'm just going to go to the next slide actually, because yeah. So you can see here that I would be a really good person to reach out to, but also Kirsi Latola, who is the VP of Thematic Networks, would be a good person to reach out to too if you have any questions about the thematic networks. But basically what you would do is we have a site online that I can send a link out to at the end of this when I send out the recording link, because this webinar will be recorded. And in that link, you'll see a list of all the different thematic networks that there are. There are several different themes. And if you have a link, or if you have a thematic network that you would be interested in joining because it is related to your research topic, or they're working on something that you have an interest in, you can get directly in touch with the lead or co-lead to inquire about the possibilities to join. You'll find the contact person listed on each thematic network page. If you notice a gap in research themes or topics and you would like to create a thematic network, there's information online about how to create a thematic network, and there's guidelines for establishing new thematic networks that I can send a link to as well. Or you could just contact the thematic network office, which would be Kirsi and Helly. Kirsi's email here. I will also send the slides out as well, so that you have the contact information. But I would highly recommend that if you are CCing a lead, or if you are CCing a co-lead, if you do have a strong interest, or if you are reaching out to a lead or co-lead, I would CC Kirsi or Helly, just because the thematic network leads tend to know their names. And if that comes up, then it's more likely you're going to get a response because, again, they are independently operated and self-governing. So they don't have to respond to UArctic. And there can be, really busy times for some of the thematic networks, and it might be hard for them to, or they might miss an email or something, especially if it's from somebody that they don't know. So don't get completely discouraged. Just reach out to me and I will do my best to put you in contact with the appropriate parties. That's part of my job, and also Kirsty as well. So funding opportunities. One of the funding opportunities is the Research, Education, and Engagement Fund. Now, the Research, Education, and Engagement Fund is usually a 2-year project. I have to note that this is the potential last year of global affairs funding. So this is the last year for funding for these projects. And so projects can only be 1 year. So previously, where this project, the Research, Education, and Engagement Fund, was a 2-year project, it is now a 1-year project for this year. We are hoping to get more funding from Global Affairs, of course, to continue these awesome projects. But for now, this is what we have. And so it's a 1-year project. It supports and encourages partnerships between Northern Canadian UArctic members, other Canadian members, and international UArctic members for collaborative research, education, and engagement activities. So that being said, Memorial University has had several researchers receive this funding since the beginning of the funds in 2022. Some projects that were highlighted in my UArctic report that you can find on the Memorial UArctic website. To also find out more information about UArctic and Memorial's engagement, I would recommend downloading the report and taking a look through. Some examples of projects that got funding include nurturing Indigenous pedagogies and place-based knowledges in Circumpolar North, relationship building for climate change in Northern communities, School of Arctic strengthening sustainability in fisheries through knowledge sharing. So those are just like the types of projects funded that are and like the types of projects funded are quite broad in diversity of topics, like whether it's arts and culture, social policy and politics, natural sciences, as long as it has 3 UArctic partners that are members. One, being Canadian lead, or the lead membership, or member being a lead Canadian member. And it's really to help work with a current thematic network and add a project to their themed network, or to create your own thematic network. So that's the main function of this fund, and to support education and engagement initiatives. The Relationship Development Fund, again, is a 1-year, and the Research Education Engagement Fund is about 40,000, or it's up to 40,000. The call opened in December and it will be done on February 15th. Same with the Relationship Development Fund. The call is finished on February 15th. So the Relationship Development Fund supports members in establishing new or strengthening existing relationships with Northern or Indigenous communities. So fostering collaborations with Indigenous and Northern communities for collective co-created research projects or Indigenous-led creative research projects. So this is up to $15,000, and this can include travel costs up to the areas that you would be going to, facilitate communication or have meetings, or, just hang out in the area and see what research they want done, as opposed to bringing your research idea to them, see if they're even interested in having that. And finally, and this one's a little bit complicated right now, but the Travel Support Fund, the last call was in December for the Travel Support Fund, but we are hoping to be able to reinstate it in the new fiscal year. So I'm going to talk a little bit about it, just in case. But the Travel Support Fund, it fosters engagement and collaboration for Northern Canadians through funding that's designed for participation in Arctic and UArctic related events. And so this can be, there's a huge range. It's up to $5,000. Eligibility is open to students, faculty, staff of Canadian UArctic member institutions. It's institutionally sponsored travel support for community knowledge holders and UArctic chairs and thematic network leads as well. And this, so yeah, like I said, the submission deadline was December, but we are hoping to be able to bring that back in the new fiscal year, depending on global affairs funding. So that is it for my part of the presentation. We will be taking questions later. So please put your questions in either the Q&A function or in the chat, and we will monitor those and we will get to the questions at the end of this presentation. So Nicole, if you want to talk a little bit about North to North, and then we can address some of the questions.
Hello. So I am just going to pull up my slides. Can everybody see that? Yeah, thumbs up, Lisa. Okay. I'm going to guess that silence is a good thing.
It's good, sorry.
Okay. I was like, I can't see anybody. Great. So my name is Nicole, Nicole Percival. I'm speaking to you from Whitehorse, Yukon, from the traditional territory of the Tonquetching Council and the Kwalin. We of course have 14 First Nations up in the Yukon. I'm hosted at Yukon University. My job is the North to North National Coordinator. So I kind of oversee the funding that we receive from Global Affairs Canada, and also am the main point of contact for the North to North coordinators in Canada. So I just prepared a really short slideshow for you, and I'm totally happy to answer questions when it's over. Because this North to North mobility program does have some complexities to it, so I'm going to keep it as simple as possible. But I'm always available, and your North to North coordinator at your institution is also extremely knowledgeable about the exchange process. So North to North overview, this is one of the great benefits, I think, of the UArctic membership is the mobility program. And so there are 71 institutions in the Arctic and non-Arctic countries that are actually a part of the North to North mobility program. There's many, many more in the UArctic network, but you have to opt into the North to North mobility program, and there's some requirements from your institution in terms of being able to reciprocate exchanges across the Arctic. So the 71 institutions, give or take one or two, are in Canada, US, Iceland, Greenland, Faroe Islands, Denmark, Finland, Sweden, Norway, United Kingdom, France, and Australia. It's an amazing variety of countries that our students and staff and faculty have the option of being able to go and do exchanges in. The North American, Australian, and UK institutions contribute to the North to North program by offering tuition waivers. Basically, the European countries don't charge tuition they don't have the same process and setup as we do. So they don't charge tuition of our students. And to reciprocate that, we offer what we call tuition waivers. And so students can go and study in America or in a UK institution and not have to pay the international student fees. They are limited, but that's one of the ways that we contribute. We support incoming and outgoing mobility. So we send students from Canada to other countries, and other countries can send their students to our institutions. We also facilitate through the North to North funding and the program inter-Canadian exchanges, because I think that we have a very enormous country. We have some amazing institutions up in the north. And when I refer to the north, I mean the Northwest Territories, Nunavut, Labrador, and Yukon Territory. The North to North Mobility Program acts as a multilateral agreement with all of the countries in the network other than Denmark. You still need to have a bilateral agreement with Denmark in order to do an exchange. But it just makes the administration a lot easier having this kind of blanket multilateral agreement. Organizing exchanges for the coordinators is much, much easier this way. So the organizational structure of the North to North Mobility Program is that we have Isabel in Norway, and she's our VP of Mobility. Then we have the International Coordination Office, which I think is also Isabel at the moment. And then after that, we have national agencies, and the national agencies are for countries who have national funding. And so Canada has national funding that comes from Global Affairs Canada. And we support students and staff on tuition exchanges. So Finland, Sweden, Norway, Kingdom of Denmark, and Canada all have national agencies. And the national agencies look after their individual institutions. In Canada, we have a Pan-Northern Steering Committee. The funding that we receive from Global Affairs Canada is very, very much focused on offering opportunities to students in the North, where traditionally the Northern and Indigenous students don't have as much access to funding for things like exchanges. And so this pot of money really prioritizes our Northern and Indigenous students. So we have a Pan-Northern Steering Committee that makes decisions about the program in Canada and makes decisions about the funding allocation. And that's from Yukon University, Aurora College, Memorial, Labrador Campus, and Arctic College in Nunavut. The funding is administered by Yukon University for this program. The priorities are to support mobility that benefits Canada's Indigenous peoples and Canada's northern regions. Our target is to support 35 exchanges annually, which is actually quite a lot. We prioritize Indigenous and non-Indigenous students and staff living and studying in Canada's North. And we absolutely provide funding for students from Southern universities as well. Particularly, we look for a focus on Indigenous studies, Arctic studies, Northern related themes and topics as well for the funding. Some quick facts. We've had the funding agreement in place for 6 years. It was supposed to be 5, but COVID. So we're actually coming up to our last year. That's going to be starting. Our next round of applications is going to be happening closing February 15th. So that's really important to keep in mind if your staff or students are interested in applying for funding for mobility. It's open now and it closes February 15th. Since 2021, we've had 190 applications from 14 different institutions out of the 19 that we have in Canada. We've approved 124 grants. We've sent people on 79 exchanges. And this was at the time, which was in the summer, and we had 16 in the pipeline. And I think about 13 of those actually did an exchange. So we were looking pretty good. And the withdrawal number is a little bit higher than that now. Yeah, so the process is that the applications are reviewed by the steering committee. The primary application round is the one that I just mentioned in February. If we have funding left over, which we always have, because people pull out for various reasons, we do another run for call for funding in September. The application procedures and eligibility are on the Yukon U Study Abroad webpage. We host it there. So that's where you can find all of the information about what you have to write for the application for staff and for students. The funding for students for a full semester exchange can be up to $9,000. There are some allowances for remote travel and accessibility, family needs, and that kind of thing. We support short-term mobility as well for students. That can be group trips, that can be cultural exchanges. We also support outbound staff and faculty mobility from Canada's North and on occasion from Southern institutions as well. And as a part of this like reciprocal relationship, we do support, generally speaking, to incoming students from UK university or Iceland or I believe America, where they don't have national funding. There's lots of options for Canadian mobility. If you have a student who you don't think would qualify for Canadian funding, we highly encourage them to apply for funding from the other countries as well. Kingdom of Denmark, Finland, and Norway all have money available that they use to help support Canadian students and students from other countries to do an exchange in their country. Particularly, we do get a lot of support from Norway, but there is funding from Kingdom of Denmark and Finland. And you can see here, Kingdom of Denmark and Norway actually support both students and staff incoming into their country if they don't qualify for Canadian funding. And although you can only receive funding from one source, we encourage you to apply for all the funding that you're eligible for. And then me and the other national coordinators sit down and go through who applied for what, and then we make decisions together. So we have staff and faculty exchanges. I just wanted to highlight this picture because we have Peter Lynn, who is a faculty member at Aurora College in Northwest Territories, and he went over for a 2-week to Svalbard to Eunice to do a 2-week exchange and learned a lot. And he was actually offered a job for a year, and so he went on sabbatical at Eunice for a year and did some teaching, and now he's back in NWT and he's trying to organize a group trip for students where he can take students from across the northern Canada to Eunice to do a short-term field course. And so this is like really the kind of thing that we're looking for with staff and faculty exchanges is how are you going to benefit your institution and how are you going to support student and polar exchange of knowledge. We are testing out group trips and cultural exchanges this year. We've had a couple of circumpolar study tours that we were actually lucky enough to have a few students from the Labrador campus come. And it's been really, really amazing. It's a really effective way for us to meet our targets for Northern and Indigenous students because we find that a lot of people can't take the time to go away for a whole semester, but they can do a couple weeks on a short-term exchange. We support incoming students with our tuition waivers. All of the institutions in Canada do that. I know MUN accepts quite a few as well. These are 2 students from Norway and Sweden that we had here in the Yukon just this last semester. And then we have some resources. So I think that you guys are getting these slides. But the ones that I really wanted to pull you towards was the Arctic North to North site. And this is where you're going to find all the lists of institutions that you can go to, contact details, information about all of those institutions. The North to North site for members is a little bit more for coordinators. But certainly there's some information on there that if you're planning a trip, you can use. And then the Canadian North to North site, which is hosted by Yukon University, is where you go to get your application forms. And I think that's it now for me, Lisa. Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, my mouse. Okay. Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Nicole. That was very informative and very helpful. So I saw a couple questions come in. One of the questions was about a couple of the questions came in about the funds, one of them being, does the Relationship Development Fund require 2+ partners as well, or would one UArctic member and an Indigenous partner suffice? So that's a really great question. I did not clarify, but yes, 2 UArctic members, including the Canadian lead. So that's the Canadian lead yourself, you yourself, and one additional partner, plus the Northern or Indigenous partner is enough for the Relationship Development Fund versus the research and education engagement, which needs the 2 UArctic members plus the Canadian lead in order to be eligible. Another question about the funds was, can applicants to the Research, Education, and Engagement Fund still ask for 40,000 despite the shorter project length? And the answer is yes, absolutely. So it's the same funding costs, but honestly, we don't suspect many people will be asking for the full amount because it is shorter periods, but you're absolutely eligible. And if you have a budget that and a very realistic plan of how that's going to be carried out, then you're absolutely still eligible for the full amount. Another question we got was about an eligibility question about the, it looks like the engagement fund. So somebody is starting to plan a new collaboration with researchers at the University of Tromsø. This is a public health and data analysis project that I was going to work on during my sabbatical in 2026. Would the engagement fund and the mobility funds be eligible for this type of work? So in regards to the engagement fund, I would need a little bit more context in regards to the actual project itself, but definitely the idea of information regarding public health in the North can be considered as a project, and data analysis can be considered as a project depending on how related it is to, the northern communities and whether or not like that's something that they're looking for. But also my concern here only would be about the sabbatical in during your sabbatical in 2026, because the funding is only 1 year. All projects would need to be completed at this point for March 31st, 2026. And so any projects that were going to happen during the summer of 2026, unfortunately, probably would not get funding because it needs to be finished by that timeline. Of course, I can't say too much, but we are in talks with hopes that the global affairs funding continues. So you'll hear more about that as we know. And somebody mentioned that they are surprised that all of Labrador is considered the North. Now, this is something that, UArctic, as well as any Northern institution or organization, has a problem defining, is what is the North. And I personally do not have the answer for that, but it's something that, it's an interesting conversation. And it's definitely something that I talk about daily with my colleagues and talk about daily with members to try to, really get a definition of what is North and what constitutes North and Northern. But yeah, those are the questions that I saw on my end. I don't know if there was any others that came through. I'm just going to look really quickly. No, it looks like that is it for questions. We have quite a bit of time left. So what I can do is I will send out some resources. So when this is finished, I will send out the recording for the actual webinar with all the information. So that includes the information on the support letters and the endorsement letters, the UArctic chairs. About the UArctic chairs, there is a call that goes out. So if that is something that you're interested in looking into, reach out to me or your primary representative, which is Tana Allen, which you can find that information on the website as well. And we will be happy to give you more information on when those calls come out. I forgot to mention that earlier. And then there'll also be more information. I'll send out one-pagers on the funding guides. I'll send out one-pagers for the North to North mobility funds and actual mobility exchanges, which, as Nicole mentioned, you don't necessarily have to have funding to do a North to North exchange. Obviously, the funding is a nice bonus, though. And I will send out my presentation as well. So that will have all contact information for you in regards to hooking up thematic networks. I can send the one-pager in regards to how to start a thematic network or how to engage with a thematic network as well. And with that, I really thank you all for taking the time to sit with us, and thank you for your questions, and thank you, Nicole, for your time as well.